So a few years ago now, I made a video called Racist Kids. It was a lot of work for me. It took like a year for me to write the whole script, and then editing it was a bit of a disaster also. And the results were not something I was completely happy with. In the end, I allowed the video to languish on Patreon for a really long time because it felt a little unfinished to me. But then I thought, what they say, you only live once, you know what I mean? And so let's just release the video. I think there's a lot in it that I enjoy and that people find interesting. And so here it is, a kind of chaotic, slightly rough around the edges little video, Racist Kids.
We believe that blacks are not equal to whites, and when the time comes, God will demand us to kill all Jews.
The person saying that is 14-year-old Jennifer Kreis. It's the year 1991, and she is on the Jerry Springer Show. The subject of today's episode is racism for kids.
Listen to what you just heard. These are vile words that did not come out of the mouth of some middle-aged bigot. They came out of the mouth of a child.
Jerry brings her on, brings on her 11-year-old sister, Amy Kreis, brings on 3 kids from another family, Nathan, Josh, and Sarah Thomas. The twist is simple and strange. Today, kids are not just the subjects of the episode, they also make up its entire audience.
What I didn't want to do is just fill the audience with adults and then have the grown-ups talking to the kids and saying, kids, you got to straighten yourself out, you can't live like this is America. No, instead, what I thought we're going to do is today our audience is comprised almost exclusively of kids their own age. Kids talking to kids about the poison of America, which is racism. Stay with us.
On one side are the good kids, the ones Jerry Springer's America was built to create, the multicultural Chicagoan children who tolerate and respect each other. On the other side is evil embodied. Now they are here to fight, and I mean, it's Jerry Springer. It gets extremely intense.
I am Jewish. My daughter is Jewish. Are you saying to me that if given the chance, you would kill my daughter?
In a second.
Why are they so racist? That's the question on the table. What do these kids have to say for themselves? Jennifer explains that she's racist because of the Bible, because Jews killed her Lord.
The Jews are responsible for crucifying our God.
When the kids say they would kill a Jew, kill Jerry Springer's daughter, what they mean is that when the end of days comes, Jews will be marked and they will be asked by God to kill them.
In the Bible, it tells us that when Yahweh returns, that's what I call my God, he's going to mark every Jew, and they shall be killed. John 8:44 states that they are from the devil's children.
Still, there's some leeway there, something that doesn't sit quite right about their beliefs. It's sobering to watch a 14-year-old say that, but of course many people would do many things that God asked them to. And in the meantime, it's not clear what these children actually want. Josh Thomas doesn't hate the Jews, he says. He hates their religion.
I don't actually hate them. I hate the religion.
He also thinks they are the sons and daughters of the devil.
And I believe that they are the devil's daughters and sons, yeah.
A young boy talks about how he's been bullied because he's Jewish, and Sarah Thomas, tiny on the stage, explains that she doesn't think it's right to say mean things about Jews, at least not to their faces.
I wouldn't say that in front of somebody, and I wouldn't make fun of them just because of what they are, but I mean, they shouldn't make fun of them in front of them.
Later on, a Jewish girl asks her,
Did I crucify your God? Did me, standing right here, did I do that?
And she's quiet. She looks absolutely flabbergasted. Who knows what Sarah Thomas wants for the Jewish people? I doubt she has a clear picture in her head. August Kreis is the father of Jennifer and Amy. August Kreis was a longtime member of the Ku Klux Klan. In 1999, Kreis joined the Aryan Nations, and after the death of its leader, Richard Gerndt Butler, he took over the reins. Kreis once allegedly pointed a gun at his 2 elderly neighbors and threatened to burn their house down because they were affiliated with an anti-racist movement. Kreis defrauded the federal government for veteran funds and went to jail for 6 months over it. In 2015, Kreis was charged with multiple counts of child molestation. Before he went to prison, where he will no doubt stay for the rest of his life, he said, "I will always hate the Jew. This government is run by an evil group of people, and please vote for Trump." I say that Christ was the leader of the Aryan nations, and that's true, but I think that might make him sound more important or prestigious than he actually was. It seems to me that, like so many members of hate movements, he was just a narcissist and a bully desperate for attention. By the time Christ became its leader, the Aryan nations was already a decaying organization, and he only aided that decay. He and another man, Jonathan Williams, both saw themselves as the rightful heirs to Butler's throne, and they disagreed over the place of Al-Qaeda in their movement. In what I take to be a publicity stunt, Christ claimed that the Aryan nations should ally with the terrorist Muslim group Al-Qaeda over their hatred of the Jew. Al-Qaeda, of course, never responded. By 2011, Christ had lost a leg and half a foot to diabetes. His movement was largely meaningless. His last post on the Aryan Nation's website was a few paragraphs complaining limply about the government cracking down on his fraud. According to Jennifer Christ, August was paid for her appearances on television.
He was like, "We need the money. How can you say no?" Because he was paid from as far as I know, it was about $1,000 each time.
According to Jennifer, he punched her in the face and broke her nose when she didn't want to do an interview.
The one time that I said no, I was literally punched in the face. He punched me in the face. So he broke my nose.
According to Jennifer, she went to the police about her father and they didn't care.
When I reported him and in 1996 up in Potter County, and the district attorney at the time refused to not just refused to prosecute, but they wouldn't even investigate.
We have to ask, why is she on this stage? Why are any of these children? What could they possibly have to say? What does Jerry Springer see in them? And I guess there's one obvious answer that jumps to mind, right? It's weird looking at them. These racist kids are scary. You ready to start? It's not original to point out that kids are often kind of scary. They're a primary subject in horror films, and I think that's largely because they're cute and innocent, and it's creepy when you make cute stuff scary. She's just a little girl, you know? Why would she have a demon inside of her? But then, as it turns out, she does. Kevin's just a baby, right? He can't be too nasty, but then look at that. He's nasty. Macaulay Culkin, good son, same vibe. He's a cute kid, but don't watch this movie unless you're ready to see some pretty fucked up stuff.
Hey, Mark. Don't fuck with me.
Okay, it's probably not quite that simple. Kids aren't just cute. They're not just innocent. They're this essential part of society. A kind of person all of us were or are. A kind of person who we get to create and who we have to take care of. Kids are a big deal. They cause a lot of anxiety, and so it makes sense that horror reflects that and reflects it in interesting ways.
Look at me, Damien. It's all for you.
The most iconic scary child movie ever made is probably The Omen from 1976. The Omen is about a family who inadvertently adopts the Antichrist named Damien, and in this way, the story it tells seems quite direct. What if you had a baby and the baby was bad? But it's not so straightforward. In truth, The Omen is kind of a letdown of a movie, and I mean that in a good way. See, the first half is what you'd expect. The protagonist replaces his own dead child with the Antichrist, duping his wife, and the child turns out to have really bad vibes. Animals are afraid of him, he's terrified of the church. In one scene, his mother is about to take a big fall, and he doesn't even seem worried about it.
No, 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 no!
But see, after that point, after the big fall scene, the movie takes this huge turn and essentially stops being about the kid altogether. Instead, the film descends into this kind of epistemic crisis where the father has to figure out what's going on, what he should do. Damien's parents were always aware that something was off there. They could see the writing on the wall. His mother, conned into the belief that Damien is her biological child, still knows on some level that he is not hers.
I need to see a psychiatrist. I have fears. I have such fears.
But how are you supposed to really accept knowledge like that? The real horror of the film doesn't lie with Damien, but with the agonizing, suspenseful process of trying to figure out if something's actually wrong here, if this boy is indeed evil. And to be clear, that's a really hard thing to do. Like, sure, Damien is creepy, but he doesn't actually do much. Would you kill your child if he screamed at a church or if someone killed themselves around him? He's like 6 years old. He couldn't have lifted his mother up before her fall, many kids put in his situation would probably act like he did, shocked, passive. The truth is, there's no evidence against this kid. In the end, the only thing that really convinces the father, that actually works as proof, is that Damien wears the mark of the beast, 666.
Is there proof? Oh, yes. He bears a birthmark. A sequence of sixes. So says the Bible to all the apostles of Satan.
This birthmark, so small that you can hardly see it, is the difference between trying to kill your son and not doing that. Look at this shot. Look at Gregory Peck in this movie. As an aside, I think this is why the latter two films in the Omen series didn't work so well. Why it's strange that these movies even exist. Don't get me wrong, I like them. I like them a lot. The second film is this beautiful depiction of Damien growing up, accepting who and what he is. And the third film is so wonderful and campy and at times beautiful. It's great.
I stand before you in the name of the one true God, who is cast out from heaven, but is alive.
But after the first film, what do these movies have to say? What if an evil guy existed? What if someone didn't like Jesus? You know, I just feel like it's overly straightforward somehow. The first movie is not about an evil child. It's about a world coming to see that evil, but not being able to understand it or react to it. It's about the moment where a father is about to kill his Antichrist son, but can't do it. It's a film about not knowing. Children are good. Parents are supposed to love them. We make children. They are in some way an extension of us. Children are the future, the mechanism through which society reproduces itself. And the Omen looks at this social position and asks, what if it all crumbles? What if the thing we made is rotten? How can we conceive of a world with children who scare us? Lord of the Flies, a 1954 novel by William Golding, also sees children as scary, though it approaches that idea in a very different way. On first pass, the book seems easy enough to interpret. In fact, that's probably the main reason why it's ubiquitous in middle and high school classrooms. It's about how people are bad and nasty, and how civilization hides our true nasty selves. It's about a bunch of kids who crash land on an island and have to make it on their own without adults. At the beginning of the story, the boys attempt to create an orderly society with the help of Ralph, a cool leader guy. They attend meetings and have civic ceremonies and maintain a fire that will allow for their rescue. There's a form of representation too. Yes, Ralph is the law, the chief of their tribe, but everyone gets a voice and gets taken care of, including the fat asthmatic Piggy.
You can't have everybody talking at once. You shall have to put our hands up like you do at school. Then I'll give him the conch.
I agree with Ralph. Got to have rules and obey them. After all, we're not savages.
But, you know, it flops. Jack, the sexy bad boy of the group, isn't interested in this stuff. He stops maintaining society, stops maintaining its fire because he's so consumed by the hunt for boars, by his own insatiable and animalistic desire. Eventually, his way takes over and all the boys engage in vicious chants and they burn down the island and they kill 2 children. Ralph weeps over the reality that man is, by nature, horrible and violent and antisocial. This is certainly a reasonable way to read Lord of the Flies, but I think maybe it doesn't go far enough. Let me talk about one of the most important passages of the book. Right toward the end, after Jack has taken a number of boys, broken from Ralph's leadership, and stolen Piggy's glasses, Piggy gets upset at the boys and says this: which is better, to be a pack of painted N-words like you are, or to be sensible like Ralph is? Reading The Lord of the Flies, it seems like an unspoken assumption of the text is that civilization is good. If the boys could follow Ralph, if they could be orderly, if they could resist savagery and abide by the proper authorities, then the world would be nice. Piggy is the greatest advocate of this belief. He has a kind of unending love for civilization and its trappings, and when he dies directly after this scene, it seems like part of the tragedy is the death of the world that he wanted. But this line, intentionally or not, sings a different tune. Here, a little white boy on an island of all white boys reproduces the systems of oppression that pervade actual society, the world that exists outside the island. Throughout the entire book, primitive tribal society is invoked. There's face painting and chants and superstition, and in this moment, this theme reaches its peak. In order to conceptualize why Jack is bad, Piggy needs to refer back to an imagined, brutish, savage black person. We come to realize, looking at this scene, that Piggy is kind of naive. Yes, the world controlled by Jack is a horrible place, it's brutal and despotic and evil, and of course Piggy's world, society and its order looks better, but this is something of a lie. There is still domination in the world of adults. There is still chaos and subjugation. The Lord of the Flies still lingers within the beating heart of civilization. Children are new and underdeveloped. They have raw desires and emotions, and they have difficulty regulating these things. They are, in some way, closer to nature than adults are, and that's for the simple reason that they have not been socialized as completely. And so, to watch Jack and Piggy and Ralph attempt to produce a society and fail, it tells us something scary. What if civilization is engraved with its own failure, its own endpoint? What if society is threatened by our desire to control and harm people, and what if there is no escape from that threat? We can choose the world of Jack or the world of Piggy, but in the end, the two speak the same language. More than The Omen, though, and more than Lord of the Flies, I think the 1940 film Pinocchio is maybe the scariest depiction of childhood ever. Of course, there's that scene in the middle of the film where children are viciously turned into donkeys.
Please, you gotta help me. Be a pal. Call that beetle. Call anybody.
Some incredibly effective body horror, partly because of its context within a kid's movie. But for me, the most evocative scene in the film is the musical number, I've Got No Strings. In the first moments of the song, we see Pinocchio surrounded by a number of marionette strings. He then sings this line.
I got no strings to hold me down, to make me red or make me brown. I hit strings, but now I'm free. There are no strings on me.
Even as a kid, I found this image, this scene, really mind-boggling, though I wasn't able to articulate why. Pinocchio is a story about a puppet who animates itself, who is free unlike every other puppet who has ever existed, and yet here, in one of the first scenes we have him, the strings are placed right back on.
There are no strings on me.
The original Pinocchio is this very light, very warm story about a mischievous child. Like, yes, Pinocchio is reckless and selfish, he kills his friend the cricket, he falls for the same get-rich-quick scheme over and over again, and he gets sent to jail because of it. And yes, Pinocchio does get better, more moral by the end of the story, but there's always a sense that we fundamentally like Pinocchio, even when he's nasty and weird. Like, let me read you one of the most famous passages of the book, where Pinocchio tells lies and his nose gets bigger and bigger and the fairy intervenes. Crying as if his heart would break, the marionette mourned for hours over the length of his nose. No matter how he tried, it would not go through the door. The fairy showed no pity toward him, as she was trying to teach him a good lesson so that he would stop telling lies, the worst habit any boy may acquire. But when she saw him, pale with fright, with his eyes half out of his head from terror, she began to feel sorry for him and clapped her hands together. This is a really relatable moment, right? You have this annoying kid and you want to teach him a lesson, but he's screaming and you love him, so you just forget about the whole thing immediately. You can lie as much as you want, Pinocchio. You're our little guy. I hope you grow up eventually, but it won't be because your nose is big. The Disney film, on the other hand, has this much more severe mentality. It feels like Pinocchio is always being bound, constrained. Of course, he's constrained by Honest John and Stromboli, who see the imprisonment of Pinocchio as an opportunity to make a quick buck. He's constrained by the Donkey Man, this Satan who wants to steal his soul away. But he's also constrained by the good guys, right? Jiminy Cricket is no longer just a helpful little guy who knows what's best for Pinocchio. Now he's the kid's conscience, and he's named after Jesus Christ himself. The Blue Fairy isn't a kindly lady who wants to let our boy off the hook. She'll only help him if he stops lying.
I'll never lie again. Honest, I won't.
Please, Your Honor. Miss Fairy, give him another chance. For my sake.
Obviously, this is supposed to be a nice thing. Pinocchio wants to be a real boy, wants to become moral. But looking at the kid in this scene, held up for society by fake strings, the most free member of society and paradoxically the most controlled, I can't help but feel there is something off about it, something anxious. Put simply, what's scary to me about Pinocchio is the question, are we harming children by making them part of our world? Of course, I think we can see all of this fear in Jennifer Christ and her friends. To see these racist kids is to wonder if liberal society might fail to reproduce, if society itself is bad, if we are doing something wrong by our children. It is scary in the way a horror movie is scary, and I do think that's the main appeal of the episode. Still, I can't help but think that something else is going on here. Jerry Springer has always been a bit odd when it comes to talk of politics and racism. Like, there's this one episode of his show called Clanfrontation where Springer brings on all these guys from the KKK. After that, he brings on Irv Rubin, then head of the Jewish Defense League, and a fight immediately breaks out. In the aftermath, Jerry and Irv talk to one another. Jerry chastises Irv for punching the racists. Irv says it's fine to punch bullies, and Jerry says,
You came out here twice now, and you basically sucker punched them. That doesn't make you any better than them if you're going to act like they do, okay? You can't do that. You can't do that.
Now, we could derail this video and have a boring conversation about political violence. Was it good for Irv Rubin to punch those Nazis? And if so, who's going to get punched next? Where does it end? For my purposes, though, I really don't want to get into it, and basically don't care. Think whatever you like about Irv Rubin in this moment. God knows the man wasn't a hero. Rubin ran the Jewish Defense League, which was, among other things, an anti-Arab terrorist organization. In 2001, he was arrested for planning to bomb a mosque in Culver City, California, though before the case went to trial, he killed himself in jail. So, complicated guy. I'm not here to redeem him or whatever. For the record, I was just watching this back, and I just wanted to clarify that I don't think that Rubin was just a complicated guy. That was a bit of comedic understatement. It's bad to murder. It's bad to attempt to murder people. So I don't agree. Still, there's something kind of odd about the way Springer talks here.
You're just as extremist as they are. Maybe the reasons are more justified, but whatever the reasons are, you are filled with anger, you are filled with hate.
Rubin's just like the KKK because he punched a KKK member. He's filled with hate, and that's bad. Every group has been victimized, and it's time to move on.
We all have to say there has been injustice done to every race in this world. At some point, we've got to say, enough!
There's just something uncomfortable and non-committal about it. Jerry here represents this perfect liberal order, right? People can have whatever opinions they have, and the real issue, the only thing we can condemn, is the violence that happens directly in front of his face. With kids, though, it seems like Jerry is able to express himself a bit more easily. He says as much to August Christ. I don't really care what you believe, I care what your kids believe.
The problem is, I can tolerate your hatred and I'll survive it. But you know what? You're sending a child into this world.
And this is a theme throughout his work. Jerry Springer made another episode featuring racist children called A KKK Family. The whole episode is spent engaging with this family, talking about how they're indoctrinating their two daughters into an ideology of hate. And in one of the last segments of the show, the mother of two children asks this incredibly interesting question.
Just say that I didn't bring the kids on the show.
You what?
It was just me and my husband and my mother, my brother, and Gordon.
Yeah.
The kids are not here. The kids are not here. What would we talk about in here?
You're so interested in my kids. If they weren't here, would you have anything to say to us? And Jerry responds, no, I wouldn't. They are the only subjects worth talking about.
The whole issue is what Gordon and you are doing when you poison a child's mind with hate.
Why is Jennifer Christ on this stage? Why are these children clad in the KKK uniform sitting here for us to gawk at? Well, here's another answer, one that Jerry really wants to remind us of. They're important. They're useful.
A lot of educating to do, because although some of these kids will someday grow out of it, some won't. And they'll have kids too, reminding us that the fight to keep America decent and free is never over.
This is nothing new. Of course it isn't. Children are a primary mechanism through which political questions are raised, political ideas communicated, political goals achieved. Consider religion, for example. It's actually pretty rare for adults to convert to Christianity, and Christianity loses many more adult members than it gains. It's obvious, then, that Christianity depends on childhood, on the fact that kids are fairly easy to indoctrinate. And I think it's for this reason, at least partly, that among hardcore conservative Christian communities, the process through which children are indoctrinated becomes sacred, all-important. Textbooks must be censored, intelligent design embraced, sex education denied, homeschooling left unregulated. Without these weapons, this kind of Christian faith is genuinely put at risk. Children are largely an uneducated and vulnerable group of people. Adults have authority over them, get to tell them what to do and what to believe, and so in some way they are the ultimate political subjects, the most optimal way to change the world. In fact, children are so useful that at times they are literally invented in our conversations for the sake of political control. You can see this perhaps most obviously in QAnon, the network of conspiratorial beliefs. QAnon is, before anything else, a political movement. Those who advocate for it believe that the Democrats are evil, that there is a tide of degeneracy sweeping the United States, often believe that Jews are in some way responsible for all of this, and that Donald Trump is a strongman hero who will set the world in order. But at the center of this movement, if you want to say there exists a center, is a very simple belief. There's a pedophile ring at the highest echelons of government. The elites are having sex with kids, and the world is designed for them to have sex with kids. Here, children are useful because they are pure, innocent. The mind of a child is precious and vulnerable. To destroy a child is to destroy the world. It only makes sense then that children are invoked, that the apocalyptic evil within a QAnoner's imagination be grounded literally in the body of a made-up child. So with all these big thoughts in mind, I wanted to take a hard left and talk about one book called Irreversible Damage, the transgender craze seducing our daughters. Because this book, written by Abigail Shrier, also makes up children to accomplish its political goals, and it does so in this very interesting way. By the way, I thought long and hard about how to make this section of the video interesting to look at when I'm literally just talking about a book for like a pretty long time. And I could only come up with drawing horrible art to accompany with it. So I hope you enjoy that, and I hope that I hope it engages you. So as you might expect, Irreversible Damage makes quite a simple argument that transgenderism is a fad, that trans men are often not experiencing genuine dysphoria, and that for this reason, the kinds of hormonal and surgical therapies many trans men will use will come back to bite them. They, teenagers pursuing these therapies, are doing damage to their bodies, and for no good reason. Right, so this is the one edit I'm going to make to this video. Originally, I talked about what I didn't like about Abigail Shrier's Irreversible Damage for like 7 full minutes, and it's such an obvious distraction from the point of the video that I am going to cut it out here. If you really want to see it, it is on my Patreon, like the uncut version. But this isn't like a cash grab. Like, don't go to my Patreon just to watch that, because it's a worse video with it in it, in my opinion. Okay. Look, Abigail Shrier is not a gender scientist or statistician, and this book is not written for nerds. And given this, I think it makes sense to focus here not on the arguments of the book, but on the narrative. Irreversible Damage is littered with testimonials about transitioning kids and concerned parents. I would call these stories the emotional core of the book, so let's take some time and look at those. Just a quick note, Shrier refuses to use male pronouns for her teenage trans subjects, and she uses girl names for all of them. For the sake of clarity and ease of reference, I'll use the name Shrier does. Fortunately, they're fake, so I don't have to dead name anyone. And while I will quote the book's pronoun usage, I will use he, him, they, them, whatever I think is appropriate based on the context. Let's get into it. Julie's lesbian parents never thought he was particularly masculine. As one of her moms said, as far as I knew, she identified as straight. She was a pretty girl and feminine. She seemed normal. Even so, across his high school career, Julie slowly came to understand himself as a trans guy. We don't learn much about Julie, how he came to understand his identity, how he felt about his parents. For one thing, Abigail Schreier just never interviews her trans subjects. But perhaps even more importantly, the text itself seems oddly incurious about the story it's telling. For example, in his freshman year, Julie joined his school's gay-straight alliance, and Schreier writes, "More than once, her mother encouraged her to skip the early morning GSA meeting and sleep in. Julie refused. There was an older girl at the GSA, Lauren, a sophomore, and Julie seemed enthralled to Lauren's good opinion. Everything was all about Lauren, Shirley told me." It's an odd passage, right? Schreier talks about Julie refusing to skip her club meetings as though it's a bit ominous, a sign of this newfound dark obsession with all things queer. It contributes to Schreier's overall narrative that teenagers are learning to be trans from each other. But in the end, basic questions just go unanswered. Why did Shirley, Sally's mother, persistently encourage her child not to go to a club meeting? Schreier writes that Julie's mothers regarded her participation in the GSA as a welcome showing of solidarity with a community that included them. Yet this choice doesn't seem in keeping with that philosophy. Why were Julie's mothers so concerned about Lauren, his upperclassman friend? Is it so odd for a teenager to value a meaningful friendship or an intense crush? For that matter, why was Julie always so invested in going to the GSA? His mother seemed to believe that this was some gesture of solidarity, but forgive me, I find that hard to believe. What 14-year-old does anything in solidarity with their parents, much less waking up early to go to school? Julie's mother's always thought he was straight and normal, yet during high school he started dating a girl, what they would call a lesbian relationship. Nobody in the text ever acknowledges this, though, their obvious misunderstanding of their child's interests and sexuality. It's just a dark spot in the book, something we don't think about. Instead, we vaguely just blame Lauren for this transition. Schreier writes, after school, Julie would often meet up with Lauren, who introduced her to anime, computer-animated images of anthropomorphized creatures. I had no idea it was tied into this whole trans culture, Shirley says. Oh, that devilish Lauren. Holy shit. Oh, that devilish Lauren. She showed our kid a furry and now she's trans. We find more of this vague, nondescriptive writing later on, as Schreier writes, by junior year, Julie had grown disenchanted with ballet and excited by a different dream, becoming a boy. She cut off her hair and demanded that her mothers use her new name and pronouns. We resisted that for a period of time, and then we thought, well, maybe we could try this out and see how it goes. Same thing. When we started calling her by her chosen name, she became angrier, more distant, emotionally detached. What do we mean by that? Julie grew angrier, more distant. Are we to believe that this is because they properly gendered him? And if so, why? What happened? Let's be clear here. Julie's parents were never supportive. They rejected the advice of a psychologist who advised gender-affirming care. They got upset at their son because he wanted to perform in the ballet as a boy and not a girl. They referred to the motives of his transition as indoctrination. At 18, Julie had to move out and go on Medicare to get the hormones he wanted. Yet I'm supposed to just take his parents' word for it? None of this stuff upset Julie? None of it made him more distant? It was his parents humoring his pronouns and name that really did it? Again, the text seems to want to ignore itself, seems fundamentally averse to exploring the family dynamics that it's supposedly about. Let's talk about another testimonial about somebody Schreier names Sally. Sally was always a masculine kid. They even had a phase at 4 or 5 where they believed they were a boy. And because of this, their parents believed it was likely they'd turn out to be a lesbian. When college rolled around, though, Sally pursued transition, and this is what Schreier writes about it. Sally sought out a campus mental health counselor. It was then that we felt the whole idea of being transgender was first suggested, Mary, Sally's mother, said. Sally was having a crew cut and was wearing a suit and tie. I guess it was a natural thing for them to suggest this might be her issue. Except, Schreier writes, that until it was suggested to her mother by her therapist, Sally had never thought she was transgender. Sally had always seen herself as a lesbian. She liked wearing masculine clothes, which for her were simply part and parcel of being a gay woman. She was never bothered by her breasts or her body. The question is obvious, right? Why does Sally's mother believe this? She wasn't in the therapist's office. She has no knowledge of what was said there. What possible justification does she have for the claim that Sally never felt dysphoria, that her therapist was responsible? Well, there is none, and the text doesn't press the issue. Rather, the emotional landscape of Sally's mother is treated as a kind of omniscient narrator. Her feelings provide all the evidence we need, and Sally's input is simply not required. You can see this attitude again a bit later on, as Schreier writes, Sally did come out to her parents, this time as trans, and indicated that she wanted to start hormones so that her body would reflect this identity. For Mary, this was a bridge too far. She told Sally, I just don't think you ought to do any medical things. I think that would be a huge mistake because I don't think you are a guy and I don't think you can ever become a guy. For a while, that message seemed to sink in. Sally stopped bringing up transitioning and Mary was relieved. There's a kind of willful naivete in this prose, a fundamental unwillingness to engage with a world outside of this unbelievably narrow perspective. Why exactly was Sally's mother so encouraged by her child dropping the issue? Did she not consider how her refusal to accept her trans child might contribute to the child not talking about it? Why was she so surprised when Sally moved out and pursued testosterone? She said she wanted to do that. There's a strange contradiction here, right? Parents are an all-seeing eye, infinitely more trustworthy about their children than the kids themselves, yet they're also buffoons, unable to understand the most basic human behaviors. Perhaps the most disgusting testimonial of irreversible damage centers on Joanna. Joanna's parents were conservative, though Schreier desperately wants us to understand they are not bigots. She writes that Richard, Joanna's father, was a religious coastal conservative who supports gay marriage, believes in small government, and has no real interest in seeing Roe v. Wade overturned. What does that mean, no real interest? Like it wasn't his hobby? What does that phrase mean? The interesting thing about Joanna is that unlike the other testimonials, it doesn't even pretend to care about Joanna or their transition. At the very beginning, Schreier writes that Joanna was a girl's girl until they came out as non-binary in their final year of high school, and that's it. That's all we know. After this point, the anecdote is solely focused on Richard, their father, this kind of unhinged guy. They sent Joanna off to college only on the condition that they not pursue transition, and when they, quote, broke that promise, he got very mad and told his child that their relationship would never be the same. And when Joanna eventually got top surgery, he sent Schreier the following text. Well, we lost the battle. Daughter had breasts removed last week. Thought we had seen a position change. I sent my kid an impassioned commentary on all the reasons not to harm herself further and plan obstacles to her professional success. 3.8 GPA, yet 0 offers or interest. Announced it on Instagram, I'm told. Total fail for me. Schreier takes his side in all of this, writes about him with intense sympathy and anguish. She writes, by the end of our first conversation, I knew beyond doubt what he never expressly said. She was the person he loved most in the world. She had broken his heart. In the most dazzling passage of the book, Schreier writes, he told me about all he had done to find her a good, safe apartment and to provide the down payment. He was also subsidizing the rent. He called her my kid over and over. There was no trace of the relationship breakdown he had threatened if she went through with a double mastectomy. She had called his bluff and won. Called his bluff. That's what Schreier chooses to write. Do you mean they pursued a path they thought would make them happy even though their father threatened their relationship over it for bigoted reasons? This is a person's life we're talking about here. This is the relationship between a father and their child, and yet Schreier conceptualizes it as a kind of game, a way of getting a daddy. You may notice something about this argument too. It literally does nothing to help Schreier's argument. If anything, it hurts her case. Irreversible damage ostensibly wants to convey the harm that trans adolescents are doing to themselves by indulging in this trans craze, but no such harm is described here. Instead, the only thing we find is the psychic harm that a bigoted parent experiences when his orders are not obeyed. And Schreier tells us very clearly, That's enough. Richard's feelings should function as an argument. So there are more testimonials in this book, and I could go through them, but I think I've described enough for you to see a pattern here. Schreier wants these passages to be emotional, to give tangible weight to the destructive world of trans ideology, but when you actually read through them, they leave a lot to be desired. There is no attention on the children in her anecdotes, no interest in what their lives are like or why they made the choices they did. There is no desire to say objective facts. Parents are the ultimate authority on their children's minds, and we never get to question that authority. No, when you read through the testimonials of this book, one thing becomes obvious. These children are fake. I mean that metaphorically. The young characters who populate Schreier's book do not have minds. They are merely empty vessels through which anxiety over transition can be expressed, gender politics affirmed and policed. But strangely enough, I also mean it literally. These kids do not exist. Not as kids, anyway. Julie started hormones at 18 years old. Sally and Joanna started in college. Lucy and Meredith, two other people Schreier talks about, also transitioned in college. Gayatri, the subject of the only other testimonial in the book, never transitioned. At least Schreier doesn't say she did. We talked about the detransitioner section before, but I didn't mention that not a single one of those people transitioned as minors either. One of them pursued HRT at 18, one at 27, and two others never pursued any medications before they concluded that trans life wasn't for them. For all of its bluster and concern and downright tear-jerking stories, Schreier never talks about or talks to one person who received puberty blockers or testosterone before the age of majority. Schreier never overtly discusses this glaring omission, but if you blur your eyes, you can find what seems to be her post hoc justification here. In the introduction of the book, Schreier goes on a lengthy, shockingly lengthy tangent about the state of 18-year-olds. As she says, members of Gen Z are less likely to go to parties, hang out with their friends, date or go for a car ride, head to a shopping mall, or even go to a movie than those of previous generations. They've never been sexually active. Many have never had a kiss. To sum it up, these teenagers don't have fun like their parents did. They just spend all their times on their iPhones, etc., etc. This all leads Schreier to the conclusion that, and I quote, 18-year-olds today have the emotional maturity of Gen X's 15-year-olds, 13-year-olds today of Gen X's 10-year-olds. Now, we could stop here and evaluate this argument, ask what exactly she means by emotional maturity, why that label is so oriented around sex and partying, how she's actually determining the mental ages of these generations. But honestly, who cares? Because the point of this rhetoric is so obvious. As I said before, Schreier does not buy into the whole transgender thing, and she assumes that more people becoming trans must be bad. But here, she faces an important issue. Making arguments against adult transitioning, while not uncommon at all, goes against basic ideas we have about liberty, about freedom. Adults are, in most cases, allowed to make judgments about what is best for them, what would make them happy. HRT is a pretty well-studied medical therapy, and there's good evidence that it genuinely improves people's lives. Certainly, we can't say it does more harm than a rhinoplasty or breast implants or alcoholism for that matter. What standing then does she have to say that there are just too many trans people these days, that we should restrict and gatekeep these therapies more? So in response to this problem, what does Schreier do? Well, she manufactures a child. She populates her book with testimonials about people who transitioned as adults, 18, 20, 27-year-olds. She pretends that these people are children, and she buffers her book with a groan-worthy argument about why that makes sense. These people aren't having sex or driving or partying, so they're babies. They're not worthy of bodily autonomy. Look, the title of this book is not Irreversible Damage, the transgender craze seducing people, or Irreversible Damage, the transgender craze seducing women. No, it's Irreversible Damage, the transgender craze seducing our daughters. Because the book is not addressed to trans people, but to those who have power over trans people, their parents. Its subject is not adults, but adults turned children, a population that demands our care and protection, a population that is easy to control, a population who we get to enforce politics about, a population who is useful. So okay, looking at these racist kids, we can see there's a kind of tension going on here. On one hand, it's important to talk to these children, to understand where they're coming from, to hear the beliefs they've inherited, to understand the impact of their abusive and horrible father. If anyone needs help, needs to be pulled into our social conversation, it is Jennifer Christ. Jerry limply attempts to get August not to raise his daughter as he has been.
How can you believe that and pass that poison on to your child?
He warns the family of its future, the way these children will be unable to function in polite society. On the other hand, Jennifer Christ is a monster. We as an audience are directed to luxuriate in her evil.
The what?
The blacks are the beasts of the field.
To hear bigotry from the mouth of an adult is one thing. To hear it from a child, that's weird, that's spectacle, that's scary. Jerry Springer has a crowd of children behind him and he points at them and says, "They are normal, you are freaks."
They are black and they are white. How come none of them are getting this message of hate?
One of the most emotional moments in the episode is where Jerry says this.
What if you're wrong? Do you ever worry about that?
No.
You don't worry. You don't worry that one day God may come back and say, "I never, ever taught you to hate."
God never commanded you to hate. You live in opposition to holiness and goodness. You are the Antichrist.
No, God is hate. God is not love like everybody else is saying.
In this way, we come to distance ourselves from Jennifer and her siblings. We push them to the outside. The relationship between Jerry and the kids, this pushing and pulling, it might appear strange, anomalous, even meaningless. This is, after all, just trash TV from the 90s, and horribly dated trash TV at that. But still, I think there's something resonant about it, something that I find super meaningful. In the last few years, there's been kind of a lot of talk about parents of estranged children, that is, people whose kids grew up and stopped talking to them. There is precious little information on this subject. It's unclear how common parental estrangement is, if it's on the upswing, and if it is, why that cultural shift is occurring. But even so, it's something that we're all, I guess, very worried about. There are breathless articles about it from The Economist and The Atlantic. Probably the leading scholar in the estranged parent movement, Joshua Coleman, wants to blame things like a rising culture of individualism and a dying sense of familial obligation. There's a PragerU video that echoes this idea, where Dennis Prager himself talks about his mean grandmother and the importance of honoring thy father and thy mother.
There is a pandemic in the Western world. What pandemic am I talking about? The pandemic of people who do not speak to one or both of their parents. Despite the fact that his mother was a very difficult woman, my father called her every night. And every night, she would yell at him. Had my father been born a generation later and told a therapist how much he dreaded calling his mother, the therapist would likely have led my father to believe there was no reason he should talk to her.
And of course, Irreversible Damage is, among other things, a book about parental estrangement, about the rifts emerging between fake trans young adults and their concerned, martyr-like parents. For the purposes of this video, I'm not actually too interested in breaking down this cultural moment, but when I saw it enter the national conversation, I remembered this fascinating and I guess very prescient article I read almost a decade ago. It's called The Missing Reasons. The article from the blogger eSendai is about a forum of parents whose adult children had gone no contact with them. The parents went online to affirm each other, say that each other's kids are being ridiculous, give empathy. But what this article points out is that oftentimes the parents never actually explain what happened. They allude to it, give slanted impressions, say it doesn't even make sense to them, but they never explain concretely why their kid left. Here's a quote from the article. "My sons consistently refuse to reply to my emails and let my calls go to voicemail or barely speak if they do answer. They accuse me of being a terrible person but won't elaborate about what exactly I've done." Well, sometimes they do, but it doesn't make any sense, at least to me. For example, it's hard to be part of the birth of my grandchild if I didn't know I was going to have one. All this started because of a personal email they felt entitled to read on my computer. As the author writes, what were were the other reasons her sons give? Not knowing about the birth of her grandchild can't be the only one. What was in the email that caused both of her sons to cut her off? We're supposed to be distracted by the hinkiness of the sons reading the email and never noticed that Vagnoni just told us that she knows exactly why her sons cut her off. Pay no attention to the missing explanation behind the curtain. I find this sort of community really fascinating because it seems to me that it situates these children in an impossible, contradictory space. The kids are, at least in this context, the centerpiece of their parents' world. The parents are in a constant state of grief and shock and confusion that this person is no longer there. And yet, the centrality of these children within their parents' mind can only function so long as they are absent, so long as they cannot speak. Their presence is only valuable as a function of their parents' desire. They can only be talked about as outsiders. Strangely enough, you can see this same dynamic crop up in a recent rant delivered by Bill Maher called A Unified Theory of Wokeness. It was recent when I wrote this section. Now I think it's 2 years old or something. In the segment, Maher sets his sight on the concept of presentism.
Presentism.
As he defines the term, presentism is the phenomenon of judging people from the past according to the modern world standards.
Which means judging everyone in the past by the standards of the present. It's the belief that people who lived 100 or 500 or 1,000 years ago really should have known better.
You know, Columbus was bad because he treated the indigenous people of America horribly. Thomas Jefferson was bad because he owned slaves. Maher's idea is that we shouldn't condemn these people because culture was simply different back then.
Did Columbus commit atrocities? Of course. But people back then were generally atrocious.
So I think Maher's perspective here is a conservative one. Don't get me wrong, I don't think it's always helpful in conversations about historical figures to spend all our time evaluating their individual moral compasses. As bad as the actions of these men were, it's usually still more edifying, I think, to look at culture, to look at the way power works in a society. There is only so much we can get out of calling people monsters. That said, Maher doesn't seem to understand or want to acknowledge why this drive exists, why it is that we might want to explicitly condemn these people. And personally, I think it's because culture has lionized them for so long. You can't have it both ways, right? You can't treat Thomas Jefferson as this incredible hero of American history and then turn around and pretend he is unworthy of moral judgment. You can't give Columbus a holiday and then be scandalized when we ask who we are celebrating. And Maher, of course, doesn't get to this point. His segment is just a 2-minute hate against the woke liberals, and because of his deep curiosity, he never interrogates why they say what they say, or wonders if they might have a point.
It's just a way to congratulate yourself about being better than George Washington because you have a gay friend and he didn't.
More interesting than what Maher believes, though, is how he argues his point, the way he conceptualizes presentism. That is, for an extremely long time, he invokes the metaphor of children.
I can't believe I thought that. I can't believe I did that. You ate dirt. You wanted to be a Ghostbuster. You shoplifted gum.
Didn't we all do things we weren't proud of as kids? Didn't we all believe bad stuff? Weren't we all cringe?
I read Ayn Rand.
To judge the founding fathers for owning slaves, it's kind of like judging a bunch of children for being naughty. It doesn't make any sense. This is, I think, a laughable metaphor on its face, right? Jefferson was not like a child. He wasn't ignorant or stupid. I mean, at various points in his career, the man was vocally anti-slavery, calling it a moral depravity, a hideous blot. To infantilize him through this appeal to immaturity misses out on so much about him, about the kind of man he was, and about the world that he lived in. Still, there's something fascinating to me about this metaphor. There's something telling. In this conversation, children are placed in a starring role. The reason we can continue to celebrate Jefferson or Columbus is because they are in some way like kids. In fact, as Maher elaborates, society is kind of like a person, and our past is like a childhood.
Because we hadn't then grown into the persons we would become. And humanity writ large is just the collective version of that.
Children, then, are the way we conceptualize ourselves, conceptualize the progress of humanity. Children are history. Children are society. And yet, again, they are only able to assume this role through a kind of exclusion. See, the idea of justice, of personal accountability for negative actions, is in some way anti-society. I don't mean anti-social, mind you. I don't mean evil. I mean that when a person commits murder and is arrested and is put in front of a judge, we are explicitly not meant to engage with them through the lens of their social world. It is wrong to commit murder. The person who murders is uniquely responsible for that act, and so they, and nobody else, deserves to be punished. But see, children are different. They do not belong to justice. When they act poorly, it isn't their fault, but the fault of their parents or of their community. And because children are seen this way, they can be cast quite easily as the font of all evil. Thomas Jefferson may have been a visionary in some ways, crafting a nation based upon liberal democratic principles, and in the moment he owned and abused people, in the moment he suggested and carried out the forced displacement of American Indians, he must be thrust out of the world of morality and turned over to the world of chaos and selfishness, to the alien world of childhood. Looking at this, I can't help but be reminded of one of Franz Kafka's most famous stories, Before the Law, featured in his most famous novel, The Trial. A man from the country walks to a place before the law, and he wants to gain entry into its walls. This isn't going to happen, though. A guard sits in front of him and says, "You might be able to gain access to the law sometime, but not now. Now you have to wait." The man does. He waits for his entire life, and when he finally dies, the guard closes the entryway. It was only ever open for him, and now it's closed for good. It's easy, I think, to read this story as a simple fable about the one-sided nature of authority. In the story, the law cannot be accessed by the countryman. It sits forever out of his reach, yet nevertheless, it bears down on him for his entire life. He cannot see the law, he cannot say how it functions, yet he still waits before it eternally. Still, we might want to make a kind of silly-sounding observation about this story. The law, it's putting in a lot of work here. I mean, it has a gate that exists exclusively for the countryman to sit in front of. There's a guard who spends decades of his life doing nothing but blocking the entrance. And that guard claims that if the countryman got past him, there'd be a bunch more guards of even greater power who are just there to prevent him, this one guy, from going in. That's a dazzling amount of effort, and for what? To keep one guy out? There must be easier ways of doing that. Here, I suggest a kind of imaginative interpretation. What if the countryman is, in fact, quite important to the law? What if his presence on the outside of its gate embodies the law in some essential way, gives it its shape and its purpose? What if his exclusion from the law is the entire point of its existence? In the final page of the story, Kafka writes, "The countryman curses the unlucky circumstance. In the first years, thoughtlessly and out loud. Later, as he grows old, he still mumbles to himself. He becomes childish." And that word, childish, makes sense to me, because like children so often are, the countryman is thrown out of the law and pushed into it at the same time, used in some fundamental way by a world he cannot access. Jennifer Christ sits on Jerry Springer's stage, and Springer talks about how sad she and her siblings are. 14 years old and exposed to poison, brought up in an ideology of hate, it's a crime and she's its victim.
You know, it's easy to pass off the kids we had on our show today as sick and deranged, and I guess they are, but what is criminal is that they weren't born like this. They were taught this poison. They've been raised this way. So the question now becomes, how do we protect the young and the innocent from being so corrupted and abused by their parents?
A few years later, Jennifer Christ comes back on the show. Now a 16-year-old, nothing has changed much. She's still a bigot, and Jerry tells her father this.
I hate what you have done to your children. That's the only thing I hate. Yes, because they're ruined.
It's a strange and horrible thing to say, I think, and in Jennifer Christ's case, not true. She would go on to shed her bigoted beliefs, to speak out against her father, to live a seemingly normal life with her family. But it doesn't matter, because Jennifer here got to do something that the countryman did not. She got to enter the law. She got to grow up. As a child, she is denied access. She is a creature on the outside, aberrant. She is brought into our political conversations as a prop, a method through which adults can debate her life and worthiness. She can be innocent and evil, important and utterly disposable. But then she turns 16, and that language disappears in the flash of an eye. In this moment, she enters our world a full-fledged subject. She is accountable for her own actions now, and she is bad, and that's all there is to say. Jerry Springer is no longer worried about her, but about the other children who will no doubt take her place.
So, when you one day have, let's say one day you have children, okay?
I'm going to raise them just the way I am.
Oh, wait.
Yes, Jennifer Christ is ruined, and through her ruining, she finally becomes human.